The thing that separates me from other critics is my head empty. I have no thoughts, preconceived or post-conceived, holding me back. Like clockwork. I always find a small game that heavily resonates with me, and I do the same thing every well-adjusted adult does. I terraform a mountain out of this molehill of joy, make it my entire personality for at least 2 weeks, and if anyone says anything that could even remotely be taken as an offense towards the newfound love of my life, I blast them from on high with the in my opinion canon. I live for hills to die on, and this week my little friend is Viewfinder. Say hello. It's another one of those charming, bite-sized, first-person perspective-based puzzle games with an unimposing narrative you can gloss over, or maybe it triggers a thought or two. But again, I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here. To me, it represents the disproportionate expectations that small-scale games have to overcome compared to bigger games. If a game is smaller in stature, they have to justify their asking price. They have to justify the reasoning behind the smaller stature. They have to justify their very existence. Just because it's a smaller game does not make it a lesser game. As I mentioned before, Viewfinder is one of those puzzle games where you need to rethink how you see the environment so that you can bend it to your will and progress. Here it's framed around a camera. You take pictures to mess around with chunks of the place. In Superliminal, you mess around with depth and perspective, growing and shrinking objects based on your point of view. In Antichamber, you find the logic within a non-Euclidean environment. And in Portal, you're thinking with portals. All of these games are short, 5 hours to play through at a leisurely pace. All of them center the gameplay around one or two specific elements. All of them, including Portal, have had to face the tech demo allegations, by which it means these games are not games. These are novelties centered around a technological gimmick with some art and a little story slapped on to give it the appearance of a game. These are nothing more than fancy advertisements for video game engines like Source, Unity, and Unreal. Well, why short games? Couldn't that just be any game? There seems to be an ambiguous cutoff point for video games, and if you're not tall enough to ride, you're simply unfinished, a sampler, or a tech demo. Call your shorty unfinished next time you see him or her, that should go over well. Which just goes to show the level of privilege that longer games have. You could be boring, broken, or bad, but at least you're not short, implying unfinished. I never really understood the hype behind The Witness, but I think I'm starting to see it now. The real genius is Jonathan Blow stuffed it so full of cereal box puzzles that it takes about 17 hours to beat it, according to HowLongToBeat.com. Pretentious game? Maybe. Still considered a game though because it made the time requirement. Continuing to use Viewfinder as a representative for smaller games, these are routinely scrutinized for the few features they have. My heart sinks to the pit of my stomach when I recommend a single serving size game and I'm met with a confused face saying, "Well, is that all?" Because we've grown so used to all-you-can-eat buffets that have spawned from the size arms race in the past 20 years. I can't even bring up the fact that the industry was founded on tinier but tighter games because I know that can be twisted to mean short games are a relic of the past. Grow up, old man. Games in the noughties could only be so big due to the limitations in technology, so it makes it difficult to justify games that only do one or two things, regardless of how well they do them. I reference again that Portal 2, while amazing in its own right, leveraged itself over its predecessor by being more than Portal 1, not necessarily better. And it's gonna get even harder to justify still. As the demographic shifts ever younger to players raised primarily on behemoth single-player games that can take up an entire week in a single stride, or the highly replayable procedurally generated games, or live service games that can potentially last a lifetime if the servers don't explode. Of course, smaller games still exist. I can name a few. Smooshy Come Home is a 3-hour romp as a little fun guy. The Stanley Parable is a 2-hour walkery of free will mockery. The Return of the Obra Dinn is a 7-hour interactive nautical logical puzzle. These are all amazing knockouts that swing for the fences, because they have to. Because there is a pressure for excellence that doesn't exist for larger games. I call it the compensation expectation. The assumption that because a game is smaller, then surely it will make up for its size with a big hit elsewhere in the mechanics or the story. And if they don't, then customers feel slighted. Akin to setting unrealistic expectations on a dating app and then calling everyone a catfish that doesn't meet those impossible standards. And that's why my height on Tinder is 5'8", makes them grateful for my towering 5'10". A Short Hike is brilliant and has overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, not just for its 1-hour world building, but for its title that manages expectations right from the rip and keeps away the type that feel betrayed by games that are only a mouthful. And it's always the popular games too. Name a short game that's average, that still gets mentioned like an average big game. Hell, I'm still hearing about Redfall. While you're at it, name AAA shorties released in the last 5 years that last around 8 hours. Kirby, kind of. With a brisk playthrough, I can toss in Bethesda's Rhythm Slasher Hi-Fi Rush, and then my mind draws a blank. I could include the 6 to 9 hour Call of Duty campaigns, but that'd be looking away from the fact that these games are sold with multiplayer. Even my standing up for the little guy needs to be justified. If you like smaller play sessions, it's because you work 40-hour work weeks, you got kids, or you're a game critic. That's rude. That's like me assuming you like longer games only because you have no job, you have no one who loves you, no family, and are a game critic. I am aware that there's a stereotype that presumes my peers and I enjoy shorter games because it makes for a lighter work week, and we're also perpetually burnt out by video games that we weep when we see something short enough to finish before supper time. Well, it's not entirely wrong, but that is to diminish the joy and space that smaller games occupy. Because I do believe these are a treat you won't find in the bigger spaces. You risk glossing over the smaller experience if you're always trying to develop a bombastic blockbuster. When in search of a smile, don't shun a grin. I believe Untitled Goose Game deserves to exist in the same sentence as Metal Gear Solid. That sentence sounds something like, Metal Gear Solid took the stealth genre to heights unmatched by other cinematic stealth games, and if you were ever interested in seeing the gameplay inverted, so that the objective is to bring attention to yourself and wreak havoc on the world for a few hours, then try Untitled Goose Game. Instead, a sentence is like, it's kind of like a parody of Metal Gear Solid if it didn't have a budget. Oh, and if you finish it fast enough, you can refund it. You're the worst kind of people. They're simple concepts, they're straightforward, but no idea is too small to attempt. And I'll tell you my favorite reason for loving the Short Kings. It's a bittersweet musing. I am always saying hello to new games. Every day, hello new game. But rarely do I get to meet a game, spend some time with it, and leave without having gone through an entire ordeal. With bigger games, I'm prone to getting tired, walking away, or being relieved that the task is done. But with a short game, it's like sharing a drink with a stranger. If I like him, I'm grateful we got the chance to meet, and hopefully our paths cross again in some fashion or another. That's my relationship with Supergiant Games and why I absolutely adore them. I'm talking about Bastion, Transistor, Pyre. Of course I love playing Hades, but there's no sweet goodbye. And if I don't like the game, then they're usually out of my life before I'm bothered and save myself a nasty divorce. It's a casual affair that asks almost nothing of you, and could end up meaning the world. Perhaps it's not as grandiose, and it's just a small happy thought in passing. I'm not saying these big games need to be smaller either. I'm just saying I want smaller games. Smaller, not lesser.